Well, good morning, everyone. So it's Monday morning again, and today we're going to start working on a scrappy crumb quilt. Now, I was told this is called crumb quilting. To me, it's just sewing scraps together. But anyway, it's not necessarily crazy quilting because we're not going for angles and stuff like that. It's pretty much straight quilting. We're going to look at that in just a moment. And we're just going to do a really simple broken dishes pattern. You'll be able to make this as big as you want or as small as you want. It's totally up to you, okay? You are not obligated to make the same size I'm making. I just chose a 10-inch block because a lot of people have layer cakes and they don't know what to do with them, and this might be an option. Now, you can make the crumb quilts to go with your layer cakes, or you could just use a layer cake and make the same kind of block, okay? The broken dishes pattern consists of 4 half square triangles. Now, I'm going to use the 10-inch, which is going to produce 4 6.5-inch blocks if you trim scantily. If you are wanting to trim a lot off, you're going to be more likely a 6-inch block or 6.25 inch. But I can get a 6.5, and so that's going to give me a final of a 12-inch block, which is a nice size block to work with. So we're just going to end up with the 4 blocks. This is so fast and easy. Y'all are going to love it. I loved it. And the variety of colors that you're going to come out with is going to be amazing. It's exciting just to cut each one apart and see what's in there. I've done a few just to practice. So let's look right here. This is a couple of the crumb quilt blocks I made. Now, I know a lot of people, when they do crumb quilt blocks, they do teensy weensy little tiny pieces. And I get it. I didn't have a lot of teensy weensy tiny little pieces, and to be honest, I didn't want to sit there and cut up my pieces and then have to sew them back together. Now, in here, every once in a while, you'll notice that here, this piece here, this was from when we did the crazy quilting, and this was from the picnic quilt we did a couple weeks back. So is this. If you really look and you watch all my videos, you'll see a lot of these fabrics were used in other things. That's just a couple I threw together. And then here, this was also from the crazy quilt part that I had. And we may use some more of that. So if you have some pieces already put together, incorporate them in there. What I did is I had some big pieces. I'll show you when we get to the sewing machine. And I just cut a hunk out and then started building around it. I didn't worry about going back and making sure everything was just tiny, tiny. That's what I did, okay? Also, you're going to need as many of the crumb quilt blocks that you make. Like I said, I'm doing 10-inch ones. You can do as small as you want or as large as you want. That's up to you. You're going to need that many contrasting 10-inch blocks, which I'm using a white on white, and that's all you're going to need for this as far as fabric goes. So scraps and some 10-inch blocks to contrast with the scrap blocks. Now, if you want to do scrap on scrap, you could do that. I just wanted mine to really pop, and with the broken dishes pattern, I think the pop really makes the pattern. So that's what I did there. So I'm just going to give y'all a little sneak peek. So this is some blocks that I did. This is 1, 2, and 3, okay? So this was, I kept them separate, but I want to show y'all. When you open them up, this was all from one block. You get this great variety of blocks all from one block, okay? So in other words, just because this was one block doesn't mean I have to keep all those blocks together. I can mix and match them however I want to. Now, I haven't decided with my broken dishes if I'm going to keep the blocks together. This one kind of has the same feel. So I might decide to keep them together. Or when I cut them apart, I might find more that has purple and I might move these out and those in. I'm not really sure. And then I might decide just to totally mix them up where nothing matches at all. Like these here, these don't really match. This is off that corner there, but these two could really be incorporated with that more. Okay, so those were all one block. Very fast, very simple to do. So we're going to run over to the sewing machine here, and we're going to make one of these blocks together. You will need a ruler that's long enough to cut a diagonal across whatever size block you have. A 15-inch ruler really was not enough to do the diagonal we're going to cut, so this is an 18-inch, or at least some kind of straight edge. And if you don't have a layer cake, you will need something to cut your layer cake sizes. You can just cut them on the mat. Actually, I used the mat to cut my 10 inches. I do have a 10-inch block, but I did not actually use it this time. I just used my mat. But whatever you use the same thing. In other words, if you start cutting your 10-inch blocks using your mat, cut everything using your mat. You want to be consistent in the ruler and the measuring system that you use. If you start flipping from one brand of ruler to another brand of ruler to another brand of cutting mat to this, sometimes there's just the slightest hair of variance in that. And if you do that, your blocks could be off in the end. And it may not matter. It may matter. I've destroyed projects by switching rulers midstream, not realizing this. So that's why I'm telling you that. You also need something to square up these half square triangles. I use the Clearly Perfect Slotted Trimmer A because it does the 6.5 inch. If you want to do 6 inches, you'll need the B. So A's are half inches, B, the B one is the whole inches. And that's what we're going to work with. And these 4 blocks here will make our broken dish pattern. I'm making 9 blocks total. It's just going to be a wall hanging. And that's it. So I'll see y'all over at the sewing machine. So here's a pile of fabric that I pulled. I pulled a variety of colors from different boxes of scraps. Y'all know I store my scraps now according to color. And I try to keep them ironed somewhat flat. That way it's a little easier for me to go ahead and use them rather than having to spend so much time sorting and ironing. Because y'all know I like my scraps flat. So as I was talking about a while ago, this is some of those pieces that were left from that other quilt stuff that I was doing. And I'm not going to use this one now. I'll put this up for something later. I still have a little piece of this. We may use that. So we have quite a bit of purple, I noticed. We may still use this, but let's just look for something else to get started with. So this is something I trimmed off yesterday to get a little bit more the right color. We don't want to start with anything too big. So let's just start with this. Now this may not end up being my center. It just may end up being a piece. So all you're going to do is choose a couple pieces. And you are going to work more with flat lines with this than you are with angles and stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew this. It's great if it's even at the top. If it's not, we'll trim it. It's not a big deal. And we're just going to sew with 1/4 inch seams. If your seam is not exactly a 1/4 inch, that's okay. I do tend to go ahead and let me grab this little cut mat here. Easier to show y'all. So I just usually flip it over and just use a little ruler of some sort to kind of trim it even. If it's not perfect, it's okay. This is just a scrap quilt. I do like to iron it as I go. So there we go. That's piece number 1. Now I'm not sure I'm going to leave it that big. I may trim that down. So let's look for something else. And y'all, I'm not concerned about color coordination. Actually, I want a variety. I do not want everything to look the same. So we'll just cut this little piece off here. And I'm going to put it along this edge. I'm going to put it like this because this edge is straighter. Now, I realize some of y'all would not necessarily put these colors together. Even in a crumb quilt, you might think, oh my gosh, that's hideous. I get that. So you do you. Be yourself. Be true to who you are in your designing. Okay? Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. You choose. I mean, you might want your crumb quilt completely color coordinated. You might want all the same color. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to my ruler along that 1/4 inch seam I just sewed. And then I'm just going to trim off this excess here. Oops. So now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, we're log cabinish looking here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little something to the top of this. And we need to find something that's long enough, or we need to find something that is, we can add to and make it long enough. So like this is not long enough, but maybe we could find something that's about its length, about its width, and add to it and make it long. Oh, is this long enough? That piece is long enough. Let's add that to it. A lot of trimming with this. Now, if I was making a bunch of these like I did the others, I would probably be working on a couple blocks at the same time. All right, so I have a little block over here that's marked 10.5 inches that I just keep testing it against. And, you know, I don't want too many big pieces. So we're going to set this on the side for a second. And let's start working on another piece of the same block. So we have this piece here. And let's cut these two together. Actually, let's put something on the end of this one. Can we put that? Let's put this on the end of this one. It's kind of like a freeform jigsaw puzzle. You can do anything you want. So now I have this piece here. Now I could add another piece to this, or I could just trim that off. And I think I'll just trim that off. Now I do have my stitch length set at 2.0. Because I like it a little tighter stitching just in case, because it is so many pieces coming together at one place. You see my 1/4 inches off there? I don't care. I'm just going to trim that straight. It doesn't make me any difference about that 1/4 inch. Let's add something else to this. I think we need a little more variety. How about that piece? Oh, yeah, let's do this piece, but let's do it on this blue side. Oh, but I want it to be, if I'm going to have to trim it, I'd rather trim off some of the aqua, not the red. So it's just a lot of just thinking about what you're doing. So now let's look at this. We had this piece here that we had trimmed off, and I kind of like it, but I'm going to look at it because I don't want a heavy seam to fall where that seam is. So if I take this and I cut it at that, right at that seam from the previous sew line, I think it'll be just fine along there. It might be a little short, but we can just trim that off. So that's not a big deal. So anytime you got some pre-made blocks, go ahead and incorporate them in. It will make it look like you've done a lot more work than you actually have. So let's look at it compared to this one. So if we were to sew those two together now, we'll be a little short down here. See that? So to give it a little variance, I think I'm going to take a piece of this. It's not quite 10 inches long this way. It's going to be short here overall. Now, I could put enough of this on here and make it go ahead and hit these two be even and just put a solid strip. Or, is this going to be long enough? Nope, it's not. So let's just do that then. I'm going to cut this piece out here because it's just going to be a big old seam by the time you take that 1/4 inch out of there. There isn't any sense in leaving that in there. Okay, but I'll make sure this measures the 10, at least the 10 inches when I cut this, and then we'll just add something to the other one. So we're going to need this one to somewhat match this length, okay? But let's be a little more inventive on that one. So let's take a couple little pieces. Let me find some small stuff here. So it's going to be enough of a width. Yes, it is. So we're going to base everything off of this little piece here. We're going to use that piece. Let's use something different. Okay. Let's sew these two together. And then we'll sew this piece on. And we'll just make us a piece that's going to be long enough to go across there. Okay, now we still got a little ways more to go. So we need a couple more pieces. Oh, what about this yellow? Perfect. Let's do this yellow. Let's hook it onto the blue side, because if we hook it to the red side, it'll just be too coordinating. Okay, so we have this here and we have this here. And I have to be honest, this is not all that exciting to me, the way I put this one together, especially this block. I think these are too big. So let me see how wide it is. If I sewed it together, it would be 10 inches, but I don't like this like this. So I'm going to cut that now. Cut that. Now I'm going to sew this on here like this. Nope, I think I'll sew, nope, I don't want it that way. Okay, this one will go like this. Okay, so now we could take this piece and we could put it over here like this. Because see, you wouldn't even see the orange. This would be a repeat. This would be a repeat. This would be a repeat. But if we sewed it like that, it would be too close. And plus we've lost a piece of our seam allowance, okay? So let's see what we got here. I had this other piece here. I like this. So I think I'm going to put a piece of this and then I'll add this on it, and that'll be more than enough variety. So let me grab one other thing here. Okay, so here's my 10-inch square that I made for my contrast out of a layer cake size. I got right sides together. Right sides together. Now what I did was I grabbed me a few pins and I pinned in place. All we're going to do is we're going to sew 1/4 inch all the way around all 4 sides. That's what we're doing. So let's get that done. Okay, that is all the sewing you need to do to make your 4 blocks that will make up your broken dish pattern. Okay guys, so I'm going to go ahead and take my pins out. Set that on the side. So the next step that we have is I'm going to go ahead and trim it down on these edges, just so we don't have all that excess to have to trim at another time. Now you may cut your blocks closer to the original 10-inch square, and you won't have any excess to have to trim away. And that's good. And this is the block that we just put together. I wanted to continue on with it so you can see where it was at and what it looks like when we cut it apart. You'll be amazed at the difference. And this is why the next step is going to show you why having a turntable is a good idea. But perhaps you don't have one. If you have a smaller mat that you can turn, just use a mat. I don't have one, or I demonstrate it to you. But if you have just a, like a 12 by 12 mat or whatever, just throw it up on that mat, and then you can just turn. See, I mean, I don't have to have this. If you take the turntable off, I can still just turn my mat and do what I'm fixing to do, okay? So don't think you got to go buy something to make this quilt, because you don't. Okay. So we're going to cut the diagonal. We're going to go from corner to corner. Now at this point, you want to make sure that you are really on it, because the way I did these blocks are pretty tight. There's not going to be a lot of waste with them. Okay, so we're going to go all the way across the middle. And you're going through 2 layers, multiple layers sometimes. So you may want to make sure you got a nice new blade in there. Let's set that on the side. Big reveal. When you take these blocks and you look at them individually, you see how different they are? Now, all next to each other, they look sort of the same. But when you pull them apart, they're not. Again, we can put these together as one piece, or we can mix all the blocks up and just grab what we want. I haven't made that decision yet. So now the next step. Let's grab one of these. Now let's use the clearly perfect slotted trimmer. First. Now this is a 6.5 inch ruler. It's going to take the whole ruler to make this block, okay? And I'm just going to line up this little dotted line here on the ruler, right about where my seam line is. Y'all gonna get my head for just a minute. I got to lean forward to see this. Okay. Now I like to put my fist here. Now I don't normally use the little cuts, but since they are at the bottom, I'm going to use them. I'm going to cut that out. Now I am going to hold pressure as I turn my mat. I'm going to put my fist back. Now I don't like my fingers out there, okay? So I use my fist because I want to keep my fingers. I used to own a trophy shop, and we had like a guillotine cutter to cut metal, and I took the tip of my finger off one time. It did not feel good. So I try to avoid that if I can. All right, so that is if you have the clearly perfect slotted trimmer, okay? Now if you don't, let me take one of these to the iron board and iron it real quick. So you don't have one of those. If you don't, you definitely are going to need a ruler that has a 45-degree angle. I'm just going to grab this one. It'll do. And I'm going to line that up, that 45-degree line, with my seam line. And I'm just going to go to one side. Now, on this one, we're going to trim as little as possible off of one side. Lots of pressure with your hand, and just take off a sliver just to square up the sides, okay? That's all you need to do. Just square up those sides. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to realign, but this time at the 6.5 inch mark. Let me look at this ruler here. Let's go this way. 6.5 inches, 6.5 inches. Now guys, this is what I was telling you don't do. I'm using 2 different rulers, and this block may be different than the other. So in doing this, you want to make sure that your 45-degree line is going up your seam line, and you are on the 6.5 and the 6.5. But I'm going to do this one because I want you to see you can do it without having to buy special tools. And there you are. Let's see how close they are. Where's the one I just trimmed? This one. I don't know. I find it's easier to press towards the white, although I know we don't normally do that. Now this one isn't pressed completely flat. They're going to be pretty close. Okay, and that's how you trim them. Okay, so we're going to trim all 4 of those. So from here, I'm going to make all 9 of my blocks and get them finished and trimmed. Then I will meet y'all up at the design wall and we will look at these blocks and how we want to set them and sew them. So here's a quick look at the broken dishes pattern made with charm blocks at 10-inch squares. So I really think it turned out quite pretty. So this is a block here. So it's just 4 blocks to make the block. I think that this quilt needs a sashing between it. I think white might be too much as a sashing. So I'm going to look and see what I have in my stash that might be very colorful that I could use for a sashing. If not, I'll try out a white one. Each one's set up the way the block was cut apart, but I'm not so sure that I'm in love with the way it's arranged. So I'm not sure. I may mix up the blocks more. I mean, they're not obligated to be in the exact form that they came apart. Basically, a broken dishes pattern is just 4 half square triangles, 2 colors pointing in, 2 solids pointing in, and then 2 and 2 pointing out. Okay, guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for that sashing, get a couple blocks ready to go into the sewing machine, show you how to put them together, and then I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I have a couple blocks here lined up. It's just a 4 patch is all it is. 2 out, 2 in, or you could go 2 in, 2 out, just opposites. Now the way we press them with everything to the white, they'll nest easily to get the whole thing sewn together. So all we're going to do is we're going to take this top part, right sides together. We are going to make sure that this up here nest, and do check it. You really want to make sure it's nested good into the corner. Okay, and once you have that, just look at it on the end, make sure it's right. And we want to slide it underneath the sewing machine. Once you get it over here, you want to make sure it's all lined up, bottom even. Bottom is going to be the same way, but your nesting point is going to be at the bottom, not at the top. Now I'm going to leave the bottom 2 attached because they're 1 block, and this is our top block. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open it up. Let's get this out the way, y'all. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to finger press again toward the white. Okay, this is our top corner with the yellow on the tip. So I'm going to remember that. Put right sides together, turn it. Now we have 3 points to match here. We have this beginning up here, we have the center, and then we have the bottom. I really kind of want to double check the center before I even move to the top. Okay, so it's in place. And I'm just going to put a pin there temporarily. Now I'm going to switch up here to my top. And I'm making sure that it's nested more than just the tip. Because it is on an angle, I just want to be sure. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove that pin. And I'm just going to hold it there where it nests and make sure everything stays lined up. Now we're going to do the bottom. Let's do the same thing here. Now this is the top. And this one's top is the light blue. Finger press to the white. So we know this is the top. This is the yellow. And look, guys, our point is right there. We look good on the 1/4 inch here, 1/4 inch here, 1/4 inch here, and 1/4 inch here. That block looks excellent. And then let's look at this one. So we said the top was the light blue. Center looks perfect. 1/4, 1/4. This one might be a little short, but I feel like this was a little short. So when I sew, I'm going to catch the outside of this line instead of the inside. I'll pay attention to that. And then this one is fine. So if that happens to you, like say you're putting your blocks together and you find that maybe you trimmed yourself a little short, don't panic. Just when you put your, I don't think I have, no, I've put everything up. Let's see here. I'm just going to grab something just for instance, okay? So when you grab your sashing or your next block, when you line it up on this. You use that as your straight edge down to your next point instead of this inside. So you don't want it, in other words, you don't want it to go angled like this, okay? You're going to want it to go straight like that. Just kind of work it out into the next block. And that way, you won't have to worry about it. It should straighten itself out. So I'm going to go ahead now and press these 2 blocks, get them back up on the board. I tried a whole bunch of different borders. I tried some white with a lot of colors. We tried pinks, blues. We tried black and white, black and gray, gray and white, gray, black and white, just all kind of colors. But nothing really looked all that great. This one's busy and it's bright, and I think it looks fabulous. So I'm going to get busy starting to put it together. So I'm going to set, what I did, because of the way this ran, I prefer more vertical runs on my sashings. I cut these at 2.5, so they'll finish at 2. So I'm going to do my rows this way, vertical rows instead of horizontal like I normally do. And it's just going to be real simple. I'm not going to film this because you don't need to see this. All we're going to do is put right sides together. So this block to this block, this block to this block. And then we'll come back and we'll sew these 2 together, and we'll just have our rows. It'll be super fast, quick and easy. So I'm going to get all this on hopefully tonight. So I wanted to pop back in here real quick before we finish this up. Last week I talked about how the sashing had the cornerstones and everything lined up pretty easy. Wasn't a big deal. This week I want to show y'all how I line up the sashing when there's no cornerstone. You've got to still make it vertical or horizontal, whichever way you're sewing, so your lines line up. So it's not hard. It's real easy. This is what I do. And some people may have a better way to do this. And if you do, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to know. And I think other people would love to know because this is important. So let's look over here. This is what I've sewn so far. This is far left side. And remember, I said I was doing my rows vertical. And so this is a long sashing here, okay? But I need this to line up with this on both sides so that it reads straight. Now, you could do this. You could just pin it and hope for the best. And, you know, if this is cut the right length and everything's been cut right, you might end up perfect. You might end up perfect. I don't know. But I don't want to take that chance. So I've already sewn the sashing and trimmed it on this block, the last row, sorry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it right side together. And I am going to go ahead and just start at one end and work myself down. So I'm going to start here at the top. And I am going to make sure that my corner is nice and straight. And that doesn't just mean just this corner. I kind of like to just, you know, make sure everything is kind of laying flat and straight all along here. Okay? To me, I think that's important because if it's all twisted and crooked somewhere in the immediate vicinity, you could have a problem. Okay. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm just going to drop a pin in. I'm going to drop it far enough back where when I sew, I don't have to take the pin out if I don't want to. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look here. What I do is this. I'll make sure you can see this. I fold it back far enough where I can see the sashing on the block that I've just sewn and the sashing that I'm trying to match, okay? And I make sure that they are lined up, and they are. So I work this back to this end. Now it is even here because I took the time to kind of straighten it out. So I'm going to put a pin here and here on both sides of the sashing. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take a second and run my fingers here and make sure it feels like it is running right. And it does. So I'm going to be happy with that. So anything between this pin and this pin needs to be worked in this section. I shouldn't have any bulk, but just in case I do, I'm just going to go ahead and throw a couple pins in there. That way, as I work towards that pin, I know that any bulk or looseness needs to be worked in before I get to that pin. Okay, now I'm going to move it down here. Trying to make sure I can keep it where y'all can see it. Now I'm going to grab the next one, which is here, right? And I'm just going to kind of feel along there, make sure it feels pretty good. And I'm going to roll it back. You see, guys, it looks straight, okay? Maybe a little to that side. Now I'm going to just kind of keep my finger there. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a pin in on this side. And I want to make sure it's to the edge. And a pin in on this side. Now I'm still going to kind of just run my fingers along here and make sure it's feeling right. It does. Again, whatever bulk I have in here, I have to work it out in this section. I don't really seem to have any. It seems to be laying flat. But sometimes we do get a little bit of extra. Okay. Now let's go to the end down here. And I want to make sure this corner is right on the spot. Right there. Is even both corners. I'm going to put a pin here. Then I'm just going to straighten it out. Put a pin in the middle. And again, I'm just going to make sure that if I have any bulk build up, it gets worked out before I get any other place. Now guys, I'm just going to take this over to the sewing machine now and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. And that should finish that up. I'm going to also go ahead and add my side and top and bottom borders while I'm at it. And then I will show y'all the finished quilt top in just a few minutes, hopefully. All right, guys. Well, guys, there it is all completed. I think the matchup of the horizontal lines is pretty good. It might not be perfect, but I think you'd have to look real hard to see it. From a distance, you can really see the broken dish pattern now. It shows up well. I think it's a great use of scraps. I guess if I had picked the borders first, I might have used different color scraps, but it really doesn't matter. I thought I was making a summer quilt. I think it could be used for summer or fall, any time of the year, really. Red kind of makes it a little bit darker. So what do y'all think? Do y'all think it's a good quilt? Let me know if it inspired y'all to do a quilt of your own. So I hope you enjoyed this week. Let me know if this has inspired you maybe to use up some more of your scraps. And guys, until next week, remember to always be yourself and please be safe. Bye.